Okay, resource management by right should be covered in second half of the class. Okay, Professor Amy should cover something about resource, but in the first half, I will cover the overall concept of planning and scheduling. Remember, I do talk about the time management. Time management is the concept of planning, scheduling, and then tracking. Okay, so we already touched on what is the introduction to planning, scheduling technique, and etc. etc. I will not touch about tracking. The tracking will be in the second half, but I will basically just simply cover some of the tracking concept, such as earned value management after this. Okay. All right. When we talk about resources, which will be covered in second half of the semester, we mean man, machine, material. Okay. And out of this man, machine, and material, we'll generate so-called money. Well, we must remember when we talk about resources, there are 5 M's in project management. Man is one of them, man, machine, material, and then money. And another M is basically method. So method can be considered as part of resources, but it is more like something that you cannot see clearly. It is embedded into the way people do things, okay? But sometimes even the method can be costly. If you want to expedite a project, you must use a proper technique, tool, in order to speed up the project. So that is how basically method play very important role in planning and scheduling as well. Okay, and from there, the money will be also generated based on whatever technique that you use. Sometimes you do not know the technique. You need to hire people with a proper know-how or basically knowledge, and sometimes you need to pay that expertise. So that can be considered as uh, another type of resources. But mostly resources that we refer to is basically more that we can touch or feel, that we can see, is basically man, machine, and material. This is where the most amount of construction costs will be paid to. Sometimes in construction, we call this thing as a direct cost. Direct cost. Whereas indirect costs normally costs related to preliminary. If you are familiar with a tender document, a contract document, there is a preliminary item such as site office, site welfare, safety and health, drawing, project monitoring, all kind of meeting, supervision, what else? The fees that you need to pay to many authorities, the inspection, the testing. So those basically under preliminary. And normally preliminary cost would be, I would say, would be less than 10%, or sometimes it is less than that. It is based on the amount of the project. The bigger the project, the quantum should be less, because when you time 5% with 1 billion, that is a lot actually. So it depends. But the direct cost is 90%. Okay. So far, what we have been talking about when we talk about planning and scheduling, let's say this is activities. We name the activity by, let's say, piling, and then duration. Let's say duration is 20 days. Okay. So we identify the name of the activity piling from our WBS activities, and then we calculate the activity duration. And how do we get this 20 days? Is by taking into account the productivity of the man, machine, and then we can say the technique that we use, the material Sometimes there are certain material which we can basically install faster compared to conventional method. So that's how we get these 20 days. So to produce or to show our scheduling, we can show in terms of bar chart, arrow diagram, or PDM diagram, but we basically attach in terms of duration. So far, we have not shown in terms of resources yet. This is where we are getting in from this topic. Okay, this topic I'm not supposed to cover the detail, but I'm just giving you the overall concept, because the first half of the semester is basically the overall concept of time management. Okay, in real project, this is from real project. This is I've taken from real project long time ago. Okay, just a sample. Normally, even during tendering stage, you need to come up with the organizational chart. In planning scheduling, sometimes this thing they call it OBS, organizational breakdown structure. The breakdown of the people. Okay, the breakdown of the people based on category of work that they are going to be assigned or delegate based on work breakdown structure. So OBS and WBS is always interrelated. Why do we need to come up with organizational chart? Because we want to attach responsibility. What kind of responsibility? Responsibility with regard to achievement of the work based on uh, based on the breakdown of the work that we come up with from our WBS. This is from the planning and scheduling concept. Okay, OBS can be referred to or related to many other things, but we are talking about planning and scheduling. Okay, so this is our organizational chart, and you notice the bracket is the bracket indicating certain values or numbers in terms of how many personnel being mentioned there. Okay, and from that from that then the second thing is basically our work program. This is what we call work program. Work program is basically the schedule, work schedule. Sometimes people call it work program, work schedule. It's the same thing. Okay, and this is master work program. We call it master. Remember when I mentioned about type of work program? We do have master work program. Then we do have detailed work program. Detailed work program. Detailed work program simply when you detail out, let's say, for instance, site preparation. Site preparation now we just indicate by just with one bar chart with that only one activity. Whereas site preparation do have many other activities, such as normally you start with site clearing, remove topsoil, and then cut and fill, and then come up with a formation level, and then slope protection, and sometimes even demolition. Part of the building demolition could be part of site preparation, and many more. When you list out those things, this is what we call detailed work program. But when you want to show only the major work program, major activities, so that's what we call master work program. So it depends, because this is generated from all project. In those days, we do not have the luxury of many scheduling software. We just simply use whatever the drawing software in order to draw the bar chart. So we cannot basically put all the details. And it is not necessary even during the tendering stage to show all the detail. When you have been awarded a project, then basically it is a must that you come up with a detailed work program, because that is the program that you are going to use as a benchmark for performance measurement, and then you are going to give the work program to the right people. They must basically, they need to know when they are going to come in and whatnot. Okay, So this is what we call work program example. So this is what we call scheduling concept. And from that, you notice we do generate manpower requirement. Okay, manpower requirement in Microsoft project. You don't have to do this. Once you input resources, automatically it will show you in what we call resource usage sheet. Next week I will demonstrate how to use Microsoft project. Okay, so next week class will be my last class dedicated toward just a demo on Microsoft project, and subsequently in the second half of the semester you should install Microsoft project in your computer, because Prof. Zaimi is going to do the hands-on session. When he do the hands-on session, he will ask you to do the same thing at your home. Follow his work step by step, because you need to answer whatever during the class. So please install the Microsoft project. You can get that thing from, go to YouTube, for instance. There are some people who basically share how to download free for maybe for a few months. That's okay. But if you are in Malaysia, you can get the original key from Shopee. But it's basically cost very cheap. Okay, so you notice list of maybe this, I say main people. Okay, management team. Okay, so all the management team are there. And then another resources that we can generate is based on, you see, this is manpower, no, sorry. This is manpower based on workers. Normally workers is more important because the quantity of workers is much more compared to the management team. Okay, so the management team basically do not change much because they will be there until the end of the project. But the most critical type of resources that we need to generate is basically workers, and we can sort them according to the trade of the workers. Okay, trade. What is their function? Carpenter, barbender, concreter, etc., etc. And you notice, for instance, bricklayer. Okay, why this one basically doesn't have the resources? Because it is it is not being shown in our bar chart. That is important of planning scheduling, because planning and scheduling is basically for us to see to what extent, how many people do we need, and when do they need to come in, how many number of their quantity, etc., etc. So we can generate those quantity accordingly. And then plant and machineries. You see, for instance, if we do not have the scheduling, if we do not attach resources, then we wouldn't know what are the type of equipment that we need, and we are not going to be well prepared. For instance, compactor 15 ton, that is quite heavy compactor. When do we need? We need in the 14 month. Why? Because we need to do something with that with regard to certain activities. So the timing must be right. You do not want to bring in equipment too early or too late. It will disrupt the other activities. So you just want to bring in the right quantities at the right time, because everything involves money. So this is where the planning scheduling basically play part. I already mentioned to you, if we do have how many number of people in our class, 13 for instance. If we give you one particular project, the same project, exactly the same information on the same project, okay, let everybody do the scheduling, including myself, okay? And I can assure you, not a single person of us will come up exactly the same planning scheduling with the rest of the class. Because planning and scheduling involve a lot of creativity, and people who are most creative, innovative, can come up with the planning scheduling with the least cost. That is the most important thing. When you can do job at the lowest cost, meaning to say you can generate more profit. That is the intention of any business. They want to generate more profit. And out of this manpower tabulation that we have seen before, you know what? We can do something what we call resource graph. This is what we call resource graph. And in software, you can see this resource graph. Once you attach resources to your activities, you can see because it is automatically generated. But of course, if you do manually using Excel, then everything you need to do to basically generate one by one. So that's why in modern days, if you do planning scheduling, it is better to use software because everything is there. Okay, and you notice the shape of this diagram, resource graph, or in particular we call it histogram. Histogram diagram. Histogram diagram meaning to say the aggregate or the quantity of resources we plot against time. This is what we call quantity. This is the time or the project duration. You notice the graph looks very nice in terms of gradual increase according to project time, the peak, and then gradual decrease. You know why? This is the, I would say, the resource histogram that has been revised many times until at the end of the day, it come out something like this. Maybe at the initial stage, when you do the resource histogram, it might not look like this. But we are the one that should make something like this by adjusting to what we need to adjust to basically our what we call bar chart, where basically the position of the start date of each activity, the end date and whatnot. Then only we can manage to get the right shape that we want. Why it is important? Okay, later on we'll go into the important to have the right shape of resource graph. Okay, just take one example, simple example. We do have activities, list of activities. So don't worry about the Malay version here. This is just the name of activity. The most important thing is basically each of the activity do have the bar chart here. Okay, you notice bar chart and you notice a dotted line. This dotted line just to indicate the total float. Total float. So meaning to say, only this activity, and this activity, three activity do have total float. This activity, for instance, we have 1 week total float. This one is also 1 week, and this one is basically 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks. The rest basically doesn't have the total float, meaning to say total float equal to 0. At the same time, they are critical activities, and at the same time, they should be on the critical path. Okay, so what is the importance of total float? Why basically in our previous classes we want to calculate early start, early finish, late start, late finish, and total float? What is the purpose? What is the function? Why don't we just simply calculate the project duration and that's it? Now I'm telling you, there is a purpose for whatever things that we have been talking about in a simple example like this. And you notice that from our bar chart or work program, we can generate what we call histogram, resource histogram, okay? Resource histogram or resource graph. You notice this one, because the dotted line is at the back of each bar, it indicates that we are using the early start date. Remember, early start and then early finish date of each activity. And when you plot graph, how do you plot? Where do you get this graph? How do you get this graph? It is actually based on the resources. This is basically resource that you attach to. Let's say laborer. Okay, for a small project, normally laborer or workers will be everybody. He is the one that can be considered as carpenter, then bar bender, concreter, bricklayer, everything. So normally in small project, the same people will be used again and again. Okay, we do not split them into trade because that is how a small project will basically go through. Okay, let's say activity 1, 2, the number of resources is 4. And how do we calculate? If we attach number, this is basically 4. 4, 4, 4, 4. So at the end of the first week, we do have 4 number of people. 4, 4. Let me erase this thing. And basically 4. And that's why the first week is there, second week, third week, and the fourth week. So 4, 4, 4, 4. And then the fifth week, you just add in the activity and which activity basically running on the fifth week, and how many number of resources based on the activity which basically run on that particular week. So you notice that 5, 2, 3. 5 plus 2 plus 3 equivalent to 10. So you see, this is week number 5, 10. This is also 10. The scale is a little bit off here. Don't worry. And then this one is 5. 5 is here. This is 5. This is 5. And the most important thing for us is the look of this graph. You see, the look of the graph, I mean here. This one. The one that I draw here. We want to know whether the graph basically have the right look or not. So this is based on early start date. Early start date. So we do have this resource histogram. But what happened? This, I would say, this is scenario A. This is scenario B, based on late start date. How to generate resource histogram based on late start? Meaning to say, you notice the differences here. Now, the activity has been pushed back. Activity which do have total float has been pushed back to the later start date. Meaning to say, we utilize the float at the beginning. Unlike this, before, the float is at the back of the bar chart there. So now we utilize the float and we push back the activity. But the activity without the total float here, we cannot do anything. It remains the same because they cannot be pushed anymore because total float is 0. Once you push the activity, then you notice the project will be extended. This is the end of the project. We do not want to change those things. You see, the end of the project remain the same. End of the project. And what happened if we draw the resource histogram based on late start? You are going to see the graph something like this. Okay, then you can make comparison. Which graph is the one that you prefer? This based on early start or late start? Okay. In construction, we do not want this kind of graph, okay, where we do have a few number of people that we need, and then suddenly it jump up, and then suddenly it basically reduced to 5, and then go back again, go up again, and then go down. This is not good in construction because you will disrupt the supply of the workers, and the workers also not going to be very happy because let's say this month they do have work, because you must remember the nature of the workers are being paid based on the work that they have. They are being paid daily rate, hourly rate. Unlike the professional, we professional engineers, We are being paid based on monthly. If the work is not available that particular day, maybe it is raining, but our salary is still running because we are being paid based on monthly. But the workers is not like that. When you do not come to work, then there is no pay for you. That is the concept. So we try to avoid that because that concept, we call it labor turnover. Labor turnover is not good in construction because you will demoralize the workers. The productivity will be gone. It is not according to what you plan. A lot of things. Sometimes nowadays, even in Malaysia, we depend too much on foreign workers. Almost 80% of our workforce in construction. If some of the workers are running from our project, they are not coming, then it is very difficult to get worker. You can get the worker, but without the experience, that basically will affect your productivity. So you would like to maintain the good labor force that you have, but then you will start with the issue, of in certain days or week, there could be more people, and then there could be less people. But you 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 notice something. How do you generate this resource graph? You generate this resource graph based on your planning. This is your planning. It's the one that you are the one that come up with this planning. If you are the one that come up with planning, you are the one that can fix this planning. So meaning to say, in real planning scheduling, we normally do utilize the early start date and early finish date, and then late start date and late finish date, and even sometime we can even use in between. What do I mean by in between? You notice this activity. You notice this activity do have 6 week of total float. Meaning to say, if we push this activity at the late start, this is late start, so we already maximize the utilization of that activity in terms of the timing. We can basically start in between. Instead of start early like this, we can start on the week number 6, week number 7, or week number 8, or week number 9. You see, that's what I call we start in between. If we do have a lot of activity with do have a total float values, then what we can do is that a good planning should consist of combination of early start, early finish, late start and late finish, and in combination. As in my example, okay, let's assume we do have another uh, bigger activity, okay, bigger project in terms of number of activities. And when we plot early start date, the resource histogram looks like this. So there is a mountain here, and then another mountain here, and then going down. But if we plot based on late start date, so it looks like there is only one mountain, but there are a lot of activity which basically protruding, which is not good. The concept in resource leveling or scheduling, the particular name, this is what we call peak, and this is what we call trough. Trough meaning to say valley, peak and valley. Okay, so and then so we do have choice. Which one we are going to use? Are we going to use the early start date for all the activity, or are we going to use the late start date of all activities? In reality, none of these can be absolute in terms of we do not use totally based on early start, and we also do not use totally based on late start. We use what we call in combination. We can combine some of the activity. We can use early start, we can use late start, but then the late start where the resources could be high on that particular time, we can move the activity to somewhere else, within the total float. Within the total float, basically values, because we do not encroach into end of the project. The end of the project date remain the same. What we are using is basically just manipulating with whatever the time that we have in terms of the free time. We try to squeeze things around so that not only we can complete the project according to what we already planned, we can also utilize the resources to the optimum level, the best possible ways. That is what we call a good scheduling. Good scheduling should always have that thing in mind. You do not just simply want to try to squeeze everything within the contract period that the client gave, but at the same time, you also want to maximize your profit by trying to optimize the resource usage. Okay, so having a scheduling software as a tool can help you to see all those things, because everything that you input will be generated into many forms, such as resource histogram, resource histogram or resource graph, such as resource usage. You can see all those values. Okay, so you notice that the concept of smoothing, resource smoothing, there is a what we call a valley, or the trough, the peak. This is the situation that we do not want. Okay, once you do the planning scheduling, for the first draft, when you plot your resource histogram, it might look like this. So this is not something that it is not good. We do not want something like this. Can we do something about this? We do something by transforming, so that when the resource is going to be increased, it will increase gradually, and the peak is there, because according to the construction project, you will start a little bit slow, because that is what we call, when you start a project, then activity, there are not so any activity coming coming according to the date that you already set aside. And then the peak, when normally the peak is where the structure already completed, then the gradual decrease when you are doing your finishing work. That is the concept. You notice the red dotted line indicate the end of the project. We do not touch the end of the project. The end of the project remain the same, but we just transform our resource usage from this shape, this is not the shape that we want, into this shape. We can do that within, by using the concept of moving the activities according to the allowable total float. Okay. That is the concept of resource smoothing, the name resource smoothing refer to. And then resource leveling. And you know what? In Microsoft project, MS project, and Primavera, the function of resource leveling is there. Maybe next week I will basically show you how to use the resource leveling in the software. Unfortunately, software do not have this function, because this function involve you as scheduler to look, to have the overview, or your bar chart, the position of the bar chart, and then you have to decide where you want to move. The computer cannot do that, okay, unfortunately. Okay, resource leveling is the concept that we in the construction industry has been used for a long time. Maybe they didn't know they have been using the concept. What is this concept? This concept simply say, let's say when you plot a graph based on resource, you will have the number of the resources might be a lot at one time, and then reduce, and then a lot again, and then reduce. So you do not want to have this situation, because sometimes you need to bring in equipment, especially equipment, at a different quantity this week, and then next week will be different quantity, the following week will be different quantity. that basically make the management of machinery more difficult, especially big machinery such as crane. You cannot have many tower crane you put in this week and then you dismantle next week, etc., etc. No. If you go to any construction site, normally, I would say maybe small to medium. For even one high-rise building, sometimes they do have only one tower crane only. Why one? Because they utilize what we call resource leveling. They just simply put one. You notice what? This is the limit. This dotted line indicate limit. We limit. We know that, for instance, let's say this could be one, this could be two. Two tower crane indicate two. This is one. Maybe for the first month we need one, and then for the second month, third month, we need for the first month we need two, for the second month we need one, and then for the third month we need two, and then one. So we simply do not have the luxury of bringing tower crane in variation. So that's why we just simply limit to one. Let's say limit to one. But then when you limit to one, there is a possibility you need to extend the work activity, because that work activity for the first month indicate from your calculation that you need two tower crane, whereas you only allocate one. So meaning to say that work has to be extended. Maybe if there is space here, then you can extend that work activity. The issue is that sometimes there is no space that you can extend. When there is no space that you can extend, meaning to say, you notice, you will extend the timing of those activities. It is not to say that you extend beyond the construction contract period. No. You still within the contract period of 2 years. But then the issue is that some group of activities, maybe 10 activities, are being specified to run for a few weeks. Then you basically extend 1 extra weeks because you limit the resources. This is what we call resource leveling. And we do that thing a lot in construction, okay? Without even realizing that we have been using the right terminology. Okay, another example. Let's say from what we have learned about AOA diagram, AON, and subsequently PDM diagram. Okay, so this diagram is using PDM. You notice this is what we call early start, early finish date. This is late start, late finish. When we do calculate, we calculate the early start, early finish, late start, late finish value, and we can even calculate the what we call the total float. Okay, remember total float, we for AON diagram is late finish minus early start minus duration. You can use this formula. Okay, so for instance, for activity, this activity, 2 minus 0 minus 2, we call it total float is 0. When total float is 0, this is TF is equivalent to 0. This is 0, 0, 0. So the yellow line indicate critical path, and activity which basically inside the critical path, meaning to say they are called critical activity. They do not have the total float. And from this exercise, you already know. See, you already know the early start date, early finish date, etc., etc. And based on the early start, total float, duration, resources, you can come up with the resource histogram based on early start date. So you notice the graph looks like this. Okay, This is one option. This I would say option one. And then you do the same exercise. You try to basically plot the resource histogram based on late start date. Okay, you notice the graph looks like this. Which one is better based on early start or late start? For sure, this one is much worse. This one is better. But you notice there is one activity, 3-4, which is just protruding from the peak there. Can you do something with that? If you want to do something, you look at 3-4. And what is the total float? 2 days. Meaning to say, if you want to push this activity, you have to push this side. So the activity will be like this. Okay, will be here or here. Two position. So not much differences. Okay. So I would say if you push that thing to this side, for instance, then that will be sufficient. So oftentimes you need to decide which basically diagram is better. If this diagram is better, and then with a little bit of pushing certain activity, then that's it. You can use the your scheduling based on late start date. This is the example. Okay, lastly, you notice this is what we call resource smoothing concept. Okay, concept. I do not want to go all the detail because I just want to give you concept only, but this is what we call part of the scheduling. When we talk about scheduling, we do not just want to put everything into early start, early finish date, late start, late finish date, and then we do not know what is the purpose of calculating those values. Now I'm telling you, there is a reason for why we calculate those values, because we want to utilize that in or apply that in resource optimization. Okay, the last one is about resource leveling. You notice that, let's say, if we take this graph as our chosen graph, okay, we choose this graph, okay, this graph is okay, but then there is another issue. We want to limit the resources. Let's say we want to limit the resources. The maximum here maybe like seven number of resources. We want to limit like 5. Notice 5 is here. 5 is here, dotted line. Okay, that is the limit. If we limit, we are using what we call resource leveling function, or we apply resource leveling terminology. Okay, you notice if we limit, then what would happen to this activity? This activity should require more resources, 6 and 7, but then we only allow up to 5 person only. So meaning to say, that activity should be extended in terms of timing. You notice the time to complete the project is 16 days. What happens if we apply resource leveling? So you see, the time has been extended. You notice a few activity, this one remain the same, but then there are a few activity which basically have to be prioritized. Then we push activity 5 to the other end. Okay, so we basically meet the objective. What is our objective? We want to limit the resources. Okay, that is good, but then we sacrifice on the activity completion date, but within the project. You do not say that it is encroaching the contract period. No. You must remember, within a project of 2 years, there could be thousand and thousand of activity. So we can say this is within the subgroup of activities. All right. So if by pushing the activity in ahead of I mean to say extended for a few days, if it's still within the allowable time range in the project, then this should be okay. There is nothing wrong to that. Okay, but this is just one of the option or the application of uh, resource utilization. All right. Okay. All right. With that, we finish on the first topic. I just want to give you some overview with regard to resources, because from what we have learned so far, we just mentioned about duration. We do not put any resources. And how about money? Money is another thing. You will learn that thing in second half of the class. Once you already attach resources, automatically money will be generated. In Microsoft project, if you do attach resources and you do attach unit rate to each of the resources, automatically money will be generated, and then that's how you will get your S curve. Okay, so with that